числе, будьте тех, кто там есть, пригласите, пожалуйста, всех, кто есть в коридоре, мы начинаем презентацию, в том числе представители издательства. Да. Such a long time. So while we are still here,
Да, наверное. Я думаю, что это у нее поднимется, что вывести представителей. Я вообще
поближе, если можно, поближе, чтобы могли.
Если можно, поближе, пожалуйста, чтобы не было ощущения пустоты. Просто многие ушли поближе, вот сюда, на эти стулья. Угу. Спасибо. Ага, спасибо.
Там представители издательства тоже хотят.
Конечно. Сказать? Нет, минуточку, у нас все это в плане, как вы сказали, это все у нас по программе, как из них. Да, сначала. Спасибо. And this one for me and one for my colleagues in Kaliningrad. I just like to. Right, and the rest one. Итак, коллеги, мы продолжаем нашу сегодняшнюю встречу, и наступило время презентации. But I'll speak English because we don't want to turn into a difficult situation. So you're most welcome to speak either English or Russian because both variants are possible. So we start this ceremony of the presentation of the book, Дискурс и власть, the translation of the book, Дискурс и власть, which was published by URSS publishing house here in Moscow. And the floor is given again to the author of the book. Turn. Yeah.
Maybe but if I sit down, no one understands. All right. Discourse and power. Discourse is lost.
Maybe it's easier for you with this microphone.
All right, yes. First of all, I would like to... No, wait a minute. Yeah. First of all, I'd like you to introduce to the one of the translators of the book, sitting here to my left, who together a few years ago they wrote a paper for one of the journals I edit, and so that was how I contacted him and his colleague, and then we talked about the paper, and we talked also about possible translation, and then suddenly he and his colleague had translated my book Discourse and Knowledge into Russian, and of course that was
power. Discourse and power.
Sorry, Discourse and Power. Thank you.
Discourse and Knowledge is yet to come.
Sorry, Discourse and Power into Russian, and that was the first time they had translated me into Russian since the 1980s, when the book Yazyk, Znание и Kommunikacja was published here in the old Soviet times. So I thought it was absolutely crucial to have a new book, not only with the work I had done until the 80s, but especially also of the last 25 years, which had to do specifically with a new phase in my work since the beginning of the 1980s, which what other people call critical discourse analysis or critical discourse studies. And critical discourse studies was a thing which we slowly invented in the 1980s with other people like Norman Fairclough in England, Ruth Wodak in Vienna, and many other people in many other countries as well. So, and critical discourse studies has to do with power. It has to do with the abuse of power. It has to do with domination. It has to do with the abuse of power in social situations, through discourse. So whereas in the social sciences we are used to do analysis of power relationship between groups, and in terms of domination and forms of domination like racism and sexism and others, from the perspective of discourse, this was not so common, because most of the work we did in the 1970s on discourse was much more purely linguistic, or on argumentation, or on narration. Most of the work of discourse in the 1960s and 70s was much more formal. We all wanted to be Chomsky. We all wanted to imitate and emulate formal things. So much of the work on discourse in the 1970s was on the formal aspects of discourse, grammar, logic, pragmatics, and all kinds of other things. But in those times we never heard about relating society and power abuse and domination with discourse until there was a book in 79, a famous book called Language and Control. Language and Control was a book by Roger Fowler and his students from Australia, like Gunter Kress, Tony True, and Bob Hodge, who together did a book called Language and Control, and they introduced the notion of critical linguistics. So the notion of critical linguistics became, at the end of the 70s only, it was a book of 79, and when I started my work, during the work I was doing on the psychology of discourse comprehension with Walter Kinch, which was later published in the book of 1983, at the same time I was more and more motivated to not only have a discourse dimension, the structures of discourse at all levels, microstructure, macrostructure, and all kinds of other things we invented then, and not only a cognitive psychological dimension, like processing of discourse, mental models, and many other things, but I thought one basic thing was missing, namely the social dimension. And the social dimension, which has to do with groups and different relationships between groups. And so more and more people were entering this area of what we call critical discourse analysis, which basically has to do with the way power and power abuse is reproduced in society through text and talk. That was what we want to do more and more. So most of the work I've been doing in this area is about racism. So my first books, first in Dutch, and then also in English and other languages, are about how people in everyday life, in the newspaper, in textbooks, in conversations, talk about immigrants, about minorities, about others. So most of the work I did in the 80s, and then also after that, is about racism and discourse. But I did not want to limit this to just racism. It has to do with power in general. So more and more, this specific work I did on racism and discourse, I wanted to generalize to power relationships in general. So during the 1990s, more and more I was writing about critical discourse analysis in general, and notions like ideology, power abuse in general. So now my concept of critical discourse studies is much more multidisciplinary, which is not just detailed discourse analysis and not detailed cognitive analysis, but also an analysis of the social relationships being involved in society, like racism, immigration, minorities, women, men, and any kind of social inequality. And many of these things in sociology are studied from a sociological point of view, but we want to study these things from a more discourse point of view, and how text and talk contributes through metaphors, through topics, through lexicon, through syntax, through any kind of discourse, somehow is ideologically polarized between us and them, between emphasizing our good things and emphasizing their bad things, in pictures, in topics, in lexicon, in metaphors. So the whole structure of discourse is ideologically polarized between us and them. So many of the papers which are now collected in this book have to do with, for example, discourse and racism, but also it has to do with, for example, politics and cognition. So how political cognition works, and so there are many more things being dealt with, but the fundamental notion is reflected in the title, namely Discourse и власть. Спасибо.
So we'd like to give the floor now to one of the translators, Evgeny Kozhemyakin, who is from Belgrade State University. Are you now federal? Are you federal university?
We're National Research University.
Research.
Yes.
I know that you are.
It's a kind of status
of
our
big
universities now.
universities
Yes.
now.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank all of our colleagues who take part in such significant and important event for all our Russian social sciences and humanities, not strictly linguistics, as we have seen from the talk of Professor Van Dijk. So this is the multidisciplinary and cross-disciplinary field, and that's why this book is a subject of interest not only of linguists but also of social psychologists, psychologists, anthropologists, and sociologists, and so on, of all who represent social sciences and humanities. And I think that I would express the commonly shared idea and emotion of that we are lucky and proud to take part in such event. And the thing is, each new translation of the book is not just a communicational or linguistic fact. So this is always a social, cultural fact. And we all remember and we all know quite well what was the first translation of the book in Russian, I mean language, cognition, and knowledge, what it was for our social sciences and humanities. So it was the social fact, and it was the cultural fact for our Russian science, and it set the agenda for discursive studies, for cognitive studies, for 90s and so the beginning of new millennium, and it set the not just agenda but also it grounded the approaches and the methodology of all these approaches of all these studies. I mean the studies of discourse and cognitive and socio-linguistic studies. And as for this translation, as for this book, which is called Discourse and Knowledge, Discourse and Power, will it be, or shall it be, such successful and such influential? We will see. But as far as I can understand, I see some actual tendencies in our social life in Russia and tendencies in sciences in Russia, which prove that this book will be useful not just for linguists once again, but widely for all who represent social sciences and humanities. Well, and these tendencies can be divided in several groups, for example. So the first one is those who deal with the social or political processes, and we see a kind of deep professionalization of power relations in the modern Russian Federation. So in this case, this book would make clear different or many situations and many processes that we face today in Russia. Secondly, we see a kind of discursivization of power relations due to internet communications and all different kinds of net communications. If you can say discursivizация, it means that this set of things in political field and in social field are set through discourse more and more, and we see that people begin to take an active part and begin to impact political and social processes more and more from year to year. So, and of course, such situation differs a bit from what we had several or maybe 10 or 20 years ago, because we moved from the direct influential to a kind of setting the agenda setting in the political sphere and social sphere through mass media, through internet, through everyday talks and so on. So I believe this book will help us to understand what goes on, what happens to us now. Thank you a lot.
And I'd like to add that the translators did a very noble act. As Valis Pasternak wrote, it's a noble man business and only mobility can afford it. They did it without any payment, free of charge. So this is quite exceptional nowadays in present day, pragmatically minded Russia. So that's why I'd like to thank the authors and Evgeny for this very heroic deed now. So let's applaud to that. Now the time has come, the walrus said, to talk of many things. So the time has come to give the floor to the publishing house. And the floor is given to Чирок Любовь Михайловна, ведущий редактор издательства «Урс». You may speak in Russian, of course.
Можно я как профессор ставлю микрофон?
Yes, please. Will you be okay without translation, interpretation, or should we interpret?
Здравствуйте, уважаемая аудитория. Меня зовут Любовь Чирок, я ведущий редактор ведущего научного издательства. Спасибо вам всем большое за выделенное время для того, чтобы стать причастными к такому важному для отечественной науки событию, выходу на русский язык книги известного европейского дискурсолога Тена А «Дискурс и власть». Самое главное, что хотелось бы сказать от лица нашего издательства, это слова огромной благодарности переводчикам книги Евгению Александровичу Кожемякину, Егору Викторовичу Переверзеву, извините, третьего забыла, и, конечно же, автору книги за то, что они доверили свое детище именно в наши руки и позволили нам стать сопричастными к рождению такого знаменательного труда на русском языке. Я до сих пор очень живо помню тот день, когда в нашей редакции предложили к изданию эту книгу, и как мы все были рады, и какой стоял трепетный ажиотаж, потому что действительно такие великие ученые издаются не так часто, и, конечно же, будем очень стараться соответствовать тому доверию, которое нам оказали. Сразу же после выхода книга получила очень серьезные положительные отклики, и вот уже более 2 месяцев продолжает активно продаваться. Мы получаем постоянно обратную связь от читателя, которые благодарны нам и переводчикам, и, конечно же, автору за то, что произошло такое знаменательное для нашей науки событие. В заключение позвольте сказать несколько слов о нашем издательстве. Мы живем и развиваемся на рынке научной литературы уже более 19 лет. У нас вышло более 6000 наименований книг. Среди наших авторов сотни представителей советской, нынешней российской, мировой научной элиты. Это и нобелевские лауреаты, академики АН СССР, академики РАН, выдающиеся профессора, имена которых, конечно же, украшают наши каталоги. Многие отечественные произведения мы перевели и продолжаем переводить на другие языки. Этим мы вкладываем, мы считаем, что это очень важно, поскольку мы позволяем советской и российской науке выступать наравне с другими представителями мирового научного сообщества и функционировать, помогая вносить вклад в мировое научное сообщество. Конечно, ни для кого не секрет, что сегодня труднейшие времена для отечественной науки в России, и, конечно же, нам приходится бороться со всеми трудностями, ограничениями, препятствиями, которые существуют в сегодняшних реалиях. Но мы считаем своим долгом не дать погаснуть тому свету, той яркости и тому огромному значению, которое играет наука для страны, и потому никакие трудности не позволят нам сойти с этого пути, на котором рождается и живет вечно интеллектуальный капитал страны, облеченный в книги. Будем очень благодарны, если вы подключитесь, и всем, кому не безразлична будущее науки, кому не безразлична судьба страны, судьба человечества, взаимодействовать с нами. Вот, заранее благодарны за будущую плодотворную работу и за помощь отечественной науке. Спасибо.
Спасибо. Now the time has come for linguists, and I know that some of our leading experts in the field, who is professor at Russian State University for the Humanities and who is involved in discourse analysis concretely, because she, together with Andrei Kubrik, compiled a special kind of discourse of children's speech. Yes, she will tell about it herself. But anyway, it's practical application of your theory at our university. Vera Isakovna, please.
So I have a very short remarks, so I'll talk from here. So I myself do corpus analysis of Russian spoken discourse, including the analysis of speech disfluences. So my short remark is on behalf of those linguists who do empirical studies in linguistics. What is very important for me is that explorations in discourse presented in this book and in the lecture today are rooted in Professor Van Dijk's earlier studies. That means that they are based on a clear understanding of how micro-events in discourse production and discourse processing are integrated into macro events, and then macro events in turn are further integrated into a holistic pattern of speech communication in society, so to say. And this correctly places practical empirical studies, I mean studies of particular discourse phenomena, into a general model of knowledge and social behavior. Hence, there is no more place for dull and dry, isolated descriptions of particular syntactic or prosodic patterns. So we have to understand how these patterns work to help the speaker to run their context and mental models. Thank you for this.
So I know that the Vice Director of Russian Academy of Sciences, Institute of Linguistics of Russian Academy of Sciences, Valery Demyankov, would like also to say a few words.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, since the 1970s, linguistics supplies other arts and sciences with new methods of analyzing empirical materials. Especially successful and valuable were and remain these efforts in the political sciences. Several generations of political scientists and of sociologists use linguistic methods to achieve impressive results concerning conceptualization of political and sociological notions in the framework of such languages as English, German, French, Spanish, and Dutch, and many others. And of Russian, of course, too. The book we are discussing today is a breakthrough. It shows a large palette of methods and gives an impressive picture of what may be called linguistic political sciences and linguistic sociology. It's an analog of what they call linguistic philosophy in the framework of the Oxbridge philosophy of language. I think it's a big breakthrough because of the palette Professor Van Dijk proposes to the investigators of the political realities and of the languages used in the framework of different societies is so impressively large and so promising that it's a good thing to translate it into Russian in order to get access in order for that our researchers and a young generation of linguists and of political scientists get the access to these methods in order to apply these methods to new realities and to to get rich results in these fields too. So all of us consider this translation of the book a huge step forward in propagating linguistics, in making it popular not only with linguists themselves, but also with larger layers of our societies, to make to receive new results in other branches of arts and sciences too. This book will make Russian readers acquainted with brilliant ideas of one of the leading thinkers of the world. I use this word thinker because Professor Tena is not only a linguist.
Van Deyk. He's not Chinese Van Chit, he's Van
Deyk. Because he's not only a linguist, but also a brilliant writer and a brilliant political scientist, and well, and a very good person. So, congratulations.
So, anybody else? I see here one of the founding figures, one of the father figures in Russian pragmatics, Professor Gorodetsky, who belongs to a school of pragmatic linguistics. So would you like to say a few words? It may be in English or in Russian. Yes. Professor Gorodetsky is one of those experts. Yes. You can sit here, you can stand, whatever you like. Yes, whichever. Maybe you...
Dear Professor Van Deyk, we are very glad to see this book published, and even its contents of the book show the broad picture of modern linguistics, theory of communication, and I would say of semantics as a general science of study in human behavior as a whole. I am head of the School of Linguistic Semantics at the Moscow Linguistic University, and this school I translate by this the Russian name Cafedra. Cafedra is closer to
department.
Yes, to the American, for instance, name for a faculty or a school and so on, or a school of linguistic semantics. It exists about 2 years as a separate school, and as I understand, it is one of the unique schools in the Europe universities. And I thank you for showing us the integrating role of your study of communication. And our practical dissertations, research results and so on show that your approach to the communication theory today is really integrating our studies, and it is very practical. We have done several dissertations which are defended in our schools and universities, and they all have one image. These are the dissertations that try to enlarge our understanding of different types of communication or spheres of communication and so on. So I try to develop the typology of communication, and I see that your results and even the general, very general methodology. It gives us the very sure view of the future of this sphere. So thank you once more, and I repeat that we see the practical role of the theory that we have in our portfolios and files. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your kind words.
Yes, you can give a card. Yes.
I will ask you to sign
The book, yes. Right. Anybody else would like to say a few words? Maybe Olga from Moscow State Linguistic University, the head of English department, Olga Viktorovna Alexandrova. She is also the head of expert council in philology at Higher Attestation Commission, VAC. So she is, so to speak, the key philologist, the key linguist in Russia.
Thank you very much. Well, it was really a pleasure to listen to your lecture, and it is great to see you, because for us you're a classic, an outstanding figure in the world linguistics. I was very glad to see a lot of our students, undergraduate and postgraduate students. I think this is a very good sign, which shows that young people are interested in those problems that are presented in your books and that were so well presented today in your speech. And I think, that the fact that they don't only know about your ideas, they appreciate it, they discuss it. This is very good, because this shows that younger generation just continues the line of linguistic investigations, which they are interested in. I think that is great, and thank you very much for this wonderful opportunity to listen to your presentation. Thank you.
So, anybody else about the book? Yes, Olga, you wanted also. Another representative of Moscow State, Lomonosov University, Olga Vishnikova.
Well, thank you very much for your coming here, Mr. Van Dijk, and I would like to thank all the organizers of the conference, of the lecture today, especially Vera Ivanovna Zabotkina, because as Olga Viktorovna has already said, we have been reading your books and trying to develop, to understand the ideas, and sometimes it was rather difficult to appreciate how great, really, how important all these ideas are for linguistics. And now, just in the course of time, you're just beginning to understand, you're beginning to appreciate your books, your creativity, so to speak, dealing with linguistics and with discourse studies. And as for me, I have already told you today that I'm interested in the problem of multiculturalism, integration, and various kinds of intercultural, international processes which deal with linguistics. And with this international discourse, which of course deserves to be studied and to be perused, to be investigated in detail, because every day, every moment, we have different kinds of new phenomena, new trends, and it's really marvelous that today you have the presentation of this book, Discourse and Power. And I think that we'll see some other books of yours, some other works of yours, and I hope that we'll meet just someday. Thank you very much, very, very much.
Okay. Yes, please. A representative from Tyumen or Perm?
Well,
Perm.
I'm from Perm, from
Perm.
the city.
It's from Siberia,
between
from Perm University, yeah.
Between Europe and Asia. The first city of Europe. Yes.
Introduce yourself, please.
And my name is Svetlana Mishlanova. I'm professor of Perm State National Research University. It's the final city of Europe. It's not far from here, but it takes 22 hours by train and 2 hours, well, by plane. And I want to say my words of thankful. I'm very thankful for the publishing this book, because many linguists in different cities of Russia take this investigations methodology into consideration to continue further development of discourse studies. And as for perspectives, I would say it's very important to take into consideration that discourse is a multi-level and complex phenomenon, and that's why we should not limit our investigation only by studying verbal information. There is a lot of kinds of visual and auditory information which surrounds the verbal information. That's why we can say that different kinds of knowledge are represented in various kinds of discourse, not only in verbal but in visual and other information. And we deal with studying of concept representation not only in verbal form but in visual, in gesture form, according to Chenke, Professor Stein from Amsterdam, and so on. And thank you very much for your contribution to linguistics and to the future of humanities studies. Thank you very much.
Anybody else from other towns? Because I know we had people coming from Novosibirsk, from many other cities, Tumen, and from the whole of Russia. Anybody here? Or they have left already, maybe for the trains or planes. So if nobody else would like to say anything else, I'd like to say a few words. I should like to start with congratulations. Congratulations on this great event, because you are loved in Russia, you know that you are referred, you are cited, maybe you are one of the most cited foreign authors here, most cited linguists. Whenever you open a dissertation or a book, in pragmatics, it starts with Van Deyk. In discourse analysis, it starts with Van Deyk. In cognitive aspects of communication, it starts with Van Deyk. All the rest is secondary. We speak now about social cognition by Croft and, you know, many other cognitive linguistics and cognitive groups such as distributed language or distributed cognition group, which also is trying to see how interaction is conceptualized. But it's all secondary because it all started with you. And I remember when I was a PhD student at Moscow State Linguistic University, half of the dissertation contains references to your books. And I'd like to stress it once again. Normally when we speak about mental models in cognitive linguistics, we quote Johnson Laird. Cognitive models started with Johnson Laird, but actually it was at the same time with Todd Van Deyk, and many people just forget about it, or maybe they didn't notice it, but he's a Renaissance personality, and that explains many things. As regards the book, I think that it's a very timely book, and the book answers the main requirements for modern research. And you know, we speak about III. Modern research should be interdisciplinary, intersectoral, international. So it meets all those III demands. Then it's for the first time that I can say I read the book, which is truly multidisciplinary, not only interdisciplinary, but truly multidisciplinary, because the critical discourse analysis is not just another method, another theory, another speciality. this is a new vision, it's a new perspective, as you write in the book. It's a new perspective, and this perspective helps to implement and practice multidisciplinary approach, because this perspective unites sociolinguistics, anthropology, pragmatics, discourse analysis, conversation analysis, and many other aspects. And you proved today brilliantly. You managed today to blend all this together into one coherent, I stress very coherent lecture, and that's the meaning, the opinion of many of us. It was a demonstration of how coherence can be achieved through following mental models and really demonstrating it. The book demonstrates, not proclaims multidisciplinary, but demonstrates multidisciplinarity, and that's what is important again. And I'd like to remind, that it helps to find this link between society and scholarly community, because the scholarly discourse and society seem to be separate. You prove no. It's just very closely related concepts. And then, of course, rather than merely describe discourse structures, you explain, and that's what is just different. And rather than manipulating fashionable terms, cognitive, mental, everybody is now speaking about mental. I once read a book, Mental Spaces of Europe. Politologist has written, what is it? Just because mental is fashionable. But your book demonstrates just a very deep and profound insight into this interconnection between society, discourse, and mental structures or mental models. So congratulations. Congratulations, and it's a great event for all of us. I'd like to thank you all for So, if that's it, we can continue asking questions, because a glass of champagne is waiting for us outside, and we can continue just asking questions and attacking turn with all kinds of comments. So I'd like to thank everybody for your time, because it's Saturday. I know everybody has to go to Dutchess, but you sacrifice, it's a sacrifice, yes, you sacrifice your time, but I think it was such a pleasure, such a privilege. And I remind you again, what we heard today was the new book. Nobody else but we were the first to be exposed to the main ideas of a new book, to be out when?
Next year.
Next year. So anyway, we are privileged. We are a group of privileged. Thank you once again. And champagne is waiting for you. Yes.
Thank you for everything. You're so generous.
No. I am absolutely honest, and it's true. It's true. Congratulations. Yes. Oh, thank you very much. Yes. So let's first let's raise a glass of champagne, and then yes, he deserves a glass of champagne.